Amidst the vast ocean or on seemingly ordinary farms, million-dollar hunts are taking place. From 13 tons of squid that can turn into over 1 million US dollars to crocodile skins transformed into Hermes bags worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, or the golden 48 hours of flying fish hunting that feed an entire fishing village. All reveal how humans turn natural products into global treasures through technology, skill, and split-second precision. The million-dollar squid hunt in the ocean. In the grand picture of the global marine economy, few would think that a seafood species as seemingly familiar as squid could become the focal point of million-dollar pursuits. Yet, that is precisely the case. In just one fishing trip, 13 tons of squid equal more than 1 million USD. A figure that makes anyone stop and wonder, why can these soft-bodied creatures, flickering in and out of the ocean's darkness, shake the international market so profoundly? The answer lies not only in their culinary value, but in an intertwined economic-political structure, where speed, technology, and the harshness of the maritime trade are reflected with clarity. To understand the heat of million-dollar squid, one must look into their very nature. Squid do not move in fixed schools like fish. Their journey depends on natural variables that seem trivial. The brightness of the moon, the turning of ocean currents, or just a few degrees difference in water temperature. That is why, to find this white gold, fishermen must become veteran ocean observers, strategists able to read the silent language of the sea. A sudden change of wind direction, a streak of shimmer under the water, or microscopic shifts on the sonar screen. Any of these can signal a million-dollar stroke of luck. But even after finding the squid, the real battle is only beginning. Squid are capable of vanishing from reach within minutes. One slow pull of the net, and they have already sunk into depths untouchable. This is precisely why each fishing trip is likened to a race against time, where every delayed second could cost tens of thousands of dollars slipping into the salty void. Here we see the intersection of tradition and modernity. On one side, seasoned fishermen whose eyes read the waves like maps. On the other, massive steel vessels equipped with radar, navigation systems, and ultra-powerful trawl winches. They do not exclude each other, but blend into a dual force that propels the squid industry farther than ever before. Yet the value of squid does not stop at capture. It is the way humans preserve, process, and place them into the global supply chain that determines whether a squid becomes a high-class dish on a dining table in Tokyo or Paris, or merely a cheap product forced down in price at a fish market. Behind every box of squid lies an entire cold chain logistics system, processing plants operating like laboratories, where each step is programmed to international standards. Freezing times, humidity levels, even the microbiological history of each shipment are recorded like a health passport. One small mistake, and that shipment is immediately excluded from the premium market, which means hundreds of fishermen facing a losing season. From an economic-political perspective, the million-dollar squid also reflects a harsh truth. Major markets like Japan, Europe, or the United States do not just buy products, they impose the rules of the game. They demand hygiene standards, require traceability, and increasingly tie sustainability to every import contract. This forces squid harvesting nations to heavily invest in preservation technologies, processing infrastructure, and even trade diplomacy to secure their place in the global value chain. In other words, squid has gone beyond the realm of food. It has become a bridge connecting remote seas to the world's economic power centers. Each squid export voyage can thus be seen not merely as a seafood shipment, but as a miniature slice of globalization. Behind 13 tons of squid worth 1 million US dollars lie the sweat of fishermen, the intellect of marine engineers, trade agreements, and the constant shifts of the economic power balance. By following the journey of a single squid, from frigid ocean waters to lavish dining tables, one can envision how an entire industry rises, adapts, and fights to survive in an ever-changing world. And that is precisely why the million-dollar squid hunt never stops at production numbers or sales prices. It is a story of grit against the sea, of absolute precision in every decision, and, above all, of an economy that knows how to harness every resource to assert its position on the global map. In the tense eyes of fishermen as the nets are hauled in, we see not only the hope of a bountiful season, but the heartbeat of a fiercely competitive market, where anyone slow to act may be left behind. The art of fishing in the million-dollar race. If finding squid in the ocean is already a grueling challenge, then keeping them in the net is truly a life-or-death battle. There is no fixed formula for this journey, only a seamless combination of modern technology and experience accumulated over generations. This is when the art of fishing steps onto the stage, where every maneuver, every decision can determine the value of the entire voyage. What makes squid hunting unique is the coexistence of two worlds. On one side are high-powered vessels, modern purse seines, positioning sensors, and automatic controllers. On the other are fishermen patiently sitting by the boat's edge, holding handlines, dropping lights into the dark sea. At first glance, these two methods seem opposite, one modern, one traditional. But in reality, they exist side by side, complementing each other, and it is this blending that creates superior economic efficiency. In industrial fishing, precision is the prerequisite. When the captain gives the signal, nets are released to depths calculated to the meter. Hydraulic engines run smoothly, stretching out a massive net that gradually tightens its circle. Every second of delay can scatter the squid, turning the entire trip into nothing. The tension in the moment the net closes is no different from a gamble, where tens of thousands of dollars hang in the balance along with the crew's heartbeat. Yet, if there were only industrialization, squid would become a soulless commodity. That is when the value of the manual method is honored. Experienced fishermen know how to talk to the sea with light. Specialized lamps are hung along the side of the boat, casting down a mystical green glow that draws squid in curiosity. The handline is lowered, each squid hooked and pulled to the surface in its most intact form. No scratches, no discoloration, no broken tentacles. It is precisely this integrity that gives handline squid its irreplaceable appeal on fine dining tables in Tokyo, Paris, or Milan. This technique requires not only skill, but also patience and discipline. The fisherman must gauge each wave, each pull of force, even the tiniest reactions of the squid underwater to act with just the right strength. Too light, the squid escapes the bait. Too strong, the tentacles tear, reducing value immediately. This is an art that no machine can replace. It is delicacy, the imprint of the human hand in an industry increasingly dependent on technology. What is noteworthy is that the coexistence of these two methods is not only economic, but also tied to trade politics. The Japanese market, famously strict, is always ready to pay many times higher for handline squid. Meanwhile, Europe and the US prefer large, stable shipments from industrial vessels. Therefore, fishermen and businesses must simultaneously meet both demands, balancing quantity and quality. This is also a strategic equation. Chase only volume, and the premium market is lost. Focus only on refined quality, and massive commercial opportunities slip away. Behind every maneuver on deck, we see the silhouette of an industry that is both artistic and steeped in political calculation. Every net dropped into the sea is a test of coordinated harmony across the system. From the captain's decision, the reflexes of fishermen, to the urgent roar of machinery. And when each fresh squid is lifted onto the deck, we realize that value lies not only in quantity, but in the way they are caught, proof of humanity's ability to command nature with intellect. In the dim green light of the night sea, when the first squid flashes its signature pink-purple glow, it is not just a moment of labor's joy. It is a sign of success for a rigorous chain of strategies, leveraging technology while respecting tradition, aiming for massive yields while preserving refined value. And it is precisely this seemingly contradictory combination that has allowed the art of fishing in the squid industry not only to survive, but to rise powerfully in the fiercely competitive global marketplace. The shift of trust. If the foundations of trade have been reinforced, if strategic alliances have been formed, and if independent standing has been affirmed, then the greatest challenge now no longer lies in how many more agreements can be signed, or how many new pathways can be opened. What Canada must confront is the shift of trust, from within the nation to the outside world. Trust is not a number on a trade balance sheet, nor does it lie in the dry words of a bilateral agreement. Trust is invisible, yet it determines the sustainability of every economic political order. It is built from how citizens perceive their country's role in the global landscape, from how businesses trust stable policies enough to dare make long-term investments, and from how other nations evaluate the consistency of foreign policy. For Canada, once freed from the overwhelming shadow of the United States, the next step is not merely further trade liberalization, but the building of new trust for itself and for its partners. The challenge lies in this: trust cannot be borrowed, cannot be bought or sold, but must be accumulated through action. Canada has long been accustomed to living in a safe zone, where many economic decisions were in some way influenced by Washington. But when it chose the path of independence, trust became the only compass for direction. Any mistake, however small, could cause partners to doubt, and it is precisely that doubt which becomes the heaviest invisible tax in global trade. In politics, building trust is doubly difficult. For citizens, trust in leadership is the assurance that short-term sacrifices will bring long-term benefits. For businesses, trust is the confidence that the rules of the game will not be overturned overnight by some political impulse. And for the international community, trust is the affirmation that Canada has enough resolve to keep its commitments, no matter how strong the headwinds. At this stage, what Canada clearly understands is this: every trade agreement only holds value when it is supported by political trust. A handshake, a promise, a public statement, all become measures of national credibility. Therefore, the true challenge is no longer about outmaneuvering opponents at the negotiating table, but about turning trust into a form of strategic asset. It is both the capital for progress and the shield against upheaval. In the past, Canada has repeatedly witnessed shocks to trust that shook its economy, from the global financial crisis to the erratic shifts in U.S. tariff policies. These experiences have become costly lessons. That dependence on external trust makes a nation vulnerable. To go far, they are compelled to build a foundation of trust of their own, beginning from the nation's core, then spreading outward to the world. What is interesting is that trust does not always mean absolute consensus. At times, it is forged in debate, in friction. Citizens trust more when they see the government willing to face criticism instead of hiding it. Businesses trust more when they see rules clear and transparent, no matter how strict. And the international community trusts more when they see a Canada steadfast, unmoved by pressure from any superpower. In a world increasingly polarized, where power blocs compete fiercely, Canada cannot simply stand by as an observer. It must become a builder of trust, a mediator, a bridge, a symbol of stability. Because it is precisely that stability which both businesses and nations desperately seek amid the undercurrents. When the economy has been strengthened, When the agreements have been signed, the remaining question is, does Canada have the ability to turn trust into a national brand? If it can, it will not only escape its old orbit, but rise to become a pole of stability in the new order. And then, what Canada sells to the world will not only be lumber, oil, or steel, but trust, the invisible commodity with the most enduring value in every negotiation. The dilemma. If past upheavals mainly stemmed from conflicts of trade interests or shifts in the White House's political strategies, then in this stage, America is confronted with a deeper paradox. Wanting to maintain its economic hegemony while being unable to avoid the reality that global linkages have become so complex, they exceed the scope of absolute control. The flows of goods, technology, finance, and even trust no longer follow the rules set by America, but are constantly tested by new power centers, where nations simultaneously cooperate and compete, both leveraging the U.S. and seeking to break free from dependence. In this context, Washington is forced to choose between two paths: either accept sharing power in an emerging multipolar order, or continue tightening influence through protectionism, sanctions, and strategic alliances. Ironically, both directions carry risks. If power is shared, the U.S. will lose the aura it has built for nearly a century, since the end of World War II. But if it insists on maintaining supremacy through coercive strength, America risks isolation within the very network it once created. This is precisely the dilemma policymakers in Washington increasingly face. The biggest bottleneck lies within. Today's America no longer has the broad consensus of the post-war era, when both parties agreed on global leadership. Instead, it is a society deeply polarized, a political system locked in perpetual confrontation, and an economy that, while still powerful, harbors latent instabilities. From massive public debt and stubborn inflation to the declining confidence of the middle class. This very fragility makes U.S. foreign policy decisions lack consistency, vulnerable to abrupt shifts with every presidential term. The world, of course, does not stand still waiting for America to find its answer. In Asia, China, India, South Korea, and even Southeast Asian nations are building multi-layered axes of cooperation, where the U.S. is only a piece of the puzzle rather than the center. In Europe, voices calling for strategic autonomy grow louder, especially after the shocks of tariffs and trade policies Washington has imposed in the past decade. Even traditional allies such as Canada, Japan, and Australia have begun to learn how to balance between interests tied to the U.S. and opportunities offered by new partners. This shift reveals a reality. Though still a superpower, the U.S. is no longer unrivaled. The question now is not only how America will act toward the rest of the world, but also whether the world still accepts the U.S. as the ultimate referee. Every tariff policy, every trade agreement, even every statement from the White House is now carefully weighed, analyzed from multiple angles, and compared with alternative choices. Trust, the most precious intangible asset America once possessed, is steadily eroding. It is in this very context that Washington's upcoming decisions will not only shape the destiny of the U.S., but also determine whether the global order truly enters a multipolar phase. America can still lead, but it must be leadership through dialogue, sharing, and adaptation, rather than imposition and coercion. Otherwise, the dilemma will not remain a metaphor, but become a reality laid bare in every negotiation, every delayed agreement, and every fractured alliance. Challenges and opportunities in the new transition. If in the previous stage Canada's steps were about laying the foundation, then in this stage the land of the maple leaf begins to face a vital question head-on: how to transform the newly built trade and political strategies into lasting strength in a world that has never stopped shifting. This moment is no longer simply about reacting to U.S. pressure or seeking alternative partners, but has become a trial by fire to prove that Canada's decisions are not just temporary improvisations, but a path that can be sustained over the years. The first challenge comes from the international environment itself. As major powers fiercely compete to rebuild supply chains and protect their market shares, Canada can no longer afford to just stand on the sidelines. From adjusting energy strategies to restructuring trade flows, every decision is scrutinized through the lens of overlapping interests. The U.S. may gradually reduce its direct control, but its influence still lingers like a vast shadow over the chessboard. Meanwhile, China, the European Union, and even rising nations such as India and Brazil all seek to draw Canada into their own orbit of interests. This is both an opportunity to expand room for maneuver and a trap that could easily scatter Canada's focus if it does not maintain strategic consistency. Yet, within the challenges lie opportunities. Canada has long been viewed by the world as a highly neutral, trustworthy nation, rich in resources. This very perception becomes a card that allows Canada to enter difficult negotiations without being automatically labeled as an adversary. Newly formed bilateral and multilateral trade agreements, if leveraged correctly, will not only open wider doors for exports, but also elevate Canada into becoming an intermediary hub, a soft bridge between global power centers. Another crucial factor is internal strength. At this time, the Canadian government clearly understands that to stand firm amid international storms, the core lies in restructuring from within, investing heavily in technology, fostering innovation, while building more independent value chains. Canadian businesses can no longer rely solely on the role of raw material suppliers. They need to move up the ladder in production chains, from battery technology, artificial intelligence, to sustainable agriculture. These sectors not only generate profits, but are also tied to geopolitical power in the new era. However, the road is not paved with roses. Any transition creates divisions within society. Regions dependent on traditional industries fear being left behind. The old workforce needs time and supportive policies to adapt to new sectors. This is precisely the sensitive equation any government must solve. How to maintain the pace of reform while preserving social consensus. If it fails, internal conflicts could very well shake the strategic foundations that were painstakingly built. What matters is that at this stage, Canada no longer views its moves as passive reactions to the storm from the U.S., but begins to see them as a journey to redefine its position. This is the pivotal difference. From a country that always had to lag one step behind, Canada is now striving to take one step ahead, even though that step carries no small risk. Looking back, the decisions in this stage resemble sowing new seeds on rocky soil. Some will sprout, some will wither, but what matters most is the relentless aspiration to plant. Canada understands that only by daring to embrace risks can it find a sustainable path, break free from the cycle of dependency, and open a new chapter for itself. And precisely within the intersection of challenges and opportunities, the shape of an independent, confident, and resilient Canada is emerging more clearly than ever. The shift of trust. When the foundations of trade had been reinforced, when strategic alliances had been formed, and when independent standing had been affirmed, Canada understood that its greatest challenge at this moment no longer lay in how many more agreements could be signed, or how many new pathways could be opened. What they had to confront was the shift of trust, both from within and from outside. For a nation, trust does not come only from GDP numbers, from the volume of exported goods, or from thick statistical reports. Trust is the consensus within its people, the recognition from international friends, and the sense of steadiness when facing the world's unceasing upheavals. Canada had gone through a long phase of dependence. then fought to break free from America's orbit. But for that path not to become a reckless adventure, they needed a greater anchor: trust. That trust had to be nurtured first in the hearts of the people. In the early years of the trade confrontation, many Canadians still doubted, could a nation of only 40 million people, standing beside a giant superpower right at its border, have enough strength to forge its own path? Yet each firm step, expanding markets into Europe, signing agreements with Asia, seeking alignment with rising nations, gradually turned doubt into pride. The people felt that, for the first time in decades, Canada was no longer merely moving within someone else's orbit, but was writing a new story for itself. However, domestic trust was only half the journey. Canada needed to prove to the world that it was not just a temporary player resisting the U.S. only because it had been pressured, but a reliable partner, a nation capable of long-term commitment. To achieve this, they had to consistently pursue principles: transparency in negotiation, consistency in policy, and above all, never turning their back on the commitments they had made. In a world where many powers are willing to withdraw from agreements whenever they feel disadvantaged, Canada's perseverance became its most valuable asset for building trust. But the shift of trust did not stop at politics and trade. It extended into culture, society, and national identity. Canada realized that if it wanted a lasting position, it had to make the world see its distinctive values. From promoting bilingual culture, developing indigenous arts, to pioneering global issues such as the environment and human rights, all became part of its strategy to build a national brand. Trust, therefore, was not only a matter of negotiation tables, but also of the heart. The way the world perceived Canada, and the way Canada perceived itself. More importantly, this shift of trust opened a new cycle. When citizens trusted their government, they were willing to support long-term policies. When the world trusted Canada, partners would choose to stay committed rather than cooperate temporarily. And when Canada trusted itself, the nation would have the courage to go further, daring to challenge even the old rules that had lasted for decades. Because trade may change with cycles, alliances may shift with upheavals, but trust, once firmly built, becomes the enduring foundation for any future path. For Canada, that is the true victory, not in the lines of numbers on a report, but in turning doubt into trust, dependence into resilience, and a nation once standing in another's shadow into an independent anchor amid the global storm. The flame of continuation. After the stormy days, after the fierce battles to escape the shadow of dependence and gradually rise to affirm its independent spirit, Canada now stands before a new threshold: how to sustain and keep alive the flame that has been lit. If the previous stages were the journey of breaking chains, building trust, and affirming position, then here, the essential matter is not only to preserve, but also to continue, to expand, and to deepen the achievements already gained. That continuation is not merely about holding on to the present, but also about sowing seeds for a stronger, more enduring future that carries forward across generations. Canada understands that true strength does not lie in fleeting bursts of brilliance, but in the ability to maintain vitality, to turn strategic steps into the steady rhythm of the nation. Such stability is the foundation so that great aspirations will not collapse in the face of storms. Having stepped out of the comfort zone, Canada is forced to learn how to live in an environment full of competition, where even a moment of negligence could allow all achievements to fall into the hands of others. And in that game, continuation plays the role of a flame. If not regularly nurtured, it will gradually fade away. What is precious is that in this journey of continuation, Canada does not choose imitation or conservatism, but knows how to breathe new winds into that flame. It is the continuous reform of trade mechanisms, the opening of diplomatic doors, and the investment in knowledge and technology, the factors that ensure development does not fall behind. Continuation, therefore, is not only about preserving what already exists, but about transforming it into a foundation to create higher, more sustainable value. On a deeper level, continuation also carries a spiritual dimension. It is the process of nurturing the trust of the people, so that every citizen can feel that the sacrifices and the changes they have embraced are not only meant to create a fleeting moment of glory, but to build a long-lasting foundation for the entire nation. Once trust has taken root, it will become a spiritual strength that spreads, helping the nation overcome new challenges without faltering. But continuation is never a path paved with roses. Canada is fully aware that sustaining the flame is difficult, and keeping it from being corrupted, from being distorted by short-term interests, is even harder. In a world full of turbulence, there are too many temptations to choose the easy way, too many invitations to return to the safe circle of dependence. It is precisely in such moments that the courage of continuation is truly tested. It demands determination, long-term vision, and above all, the ability to learn from the past without being bound by it. When the first flames were lit, they carried the colors of explosion, of the desire for liberation. But when entering the stage of continuation, that flame needs to become a stable light, guiding the way for long-term steps. Canada understands that a nation cannot live forever in the mindset of constant battle. It must learn to live with clarity, perseverance, and continuous renewal to sustain its strength. And so, amid unceasing upheavals, Canada chooses to walk with the mindset of a flamekeeper, both protecting the flame already burning and patiently seeking new fuel so it may continue to shine. That is precisely the courage of continuation, not rushed, not complacent, but steadfast, profound, and enduring. That flame, once rooted in the consciousness of the nation, will become a light not only for the present, but also for the generations to come.